The first leg of this voyage from Booth Bay to St. John's, Newfoundland was pretty rough and pretty much what I expected. I got to see a lot of places that I've been reading about for years, and they weren't places so much as fishing banks. I got to see Le Havre, Banquereau, the Grand Banks of Newfoundland, and they all pretty much looked like I would expect. Foggy and gray and rough, really rough. And it gave me a lot of reverence for the men who used to use our dories to fish there. We left Booth Bay in pretty fair weather. We got out there and there was a pretty good groundswell running for a few days, and had a decent run to Cape Sable on the south end of Nova Scotia, but there wasn't much wind, and what wind there was contrary. We had a couple of days of decent sailing, but we used the engine for a lot of the time. Once we got around Nova Scotia, we had to bear sort of east to get around Sable Island, and we went around the outside of Sable Island, and that was pretty much as I would have expected. Nasty, rainy, windy, foggy, horrible. And from there, we sort of bore away for Newfoundland to get St. John's, and we had a couple of days we had to go hither and thither to try to catch some wind, some predicted wind, and then had a pretty foggy last, I would say, 4 days until we got up into Newfoundland, which is where we are now, which is a very, very, very cool place. Coming into St. John's was a trip. You were in the fog, dense fog, and basically it looked like you were headed at a cliff. You could see a dark landmass, and you could see white breakers, which is terrifying. And there's a really narrow pass through these cliffs, and you can only see it when you get right there. And in we came, and all of a sudden we're in this big, beautiful lagoon-like harbor. The students aboard have borne up under the weather conditions and the sea conditions. Many were seasick the first few days, but after that, they showed up happily, for watch in the dark, in the cold, in the rain, and I commend them for how tough they have been. Hey everybody, we made it to Greenland. We left St. John's, Newfoundland on a beautiful sunny day. Had a wonderful sail for about 24 hours before the wind came up ahead, and we had fog and foul wind for a few days. And then the first thing we saw was the coast of Labrador and icebergs, big icebergs up against the shore of Labrador. And it's kind of unbelievable when you see them for the first time. I thought it was white water breaking on the rocks, and then I'm like, wow, that white water just doesn't disperse. And then we were in the fog, and then you could see this big towering iceberg. And then we continued to see them up the coast of Labrador. We didn't stop. We took a hard right and cut across the Davis Strait, which is a really interesting body of water. It's incredibly deep, and there's a current that runs north to south on the western side, and then another current on the eastern side that runs south to north, and it's kind of a big gyre in there. But the water is almost a beautiful Caribbean blue. And once we got away from shore, we had gorgeous sunny days. And the last day we got to Nuuk, Greenland, it was actually sunny to the point where we were taking off some outer layers. But for every watch, I have on long underwear, jeans, my foul weather pants, a winter jacket, a hooded sweatshirt, and an outer jacket of usually, if it's not my raincoat, then it's a big winter coat, and then a hat, and then gloves, because it is windy, wet, and cold, like low 40 degrees. When the spray comes aboard, the sea surface temperature is 36 degrees, and so you are just freezing to be on deck for 4 hours. And then when you're relieved from watch, it is such a relief, and you run down to your bunk and cozy up in your warm bunk for as long as you can. But that last sunny day coming into Greenland was such a relief. And we did, in the middle of the Davis Strait, come across a floating fish net, just a ghost net that had broken free from a fishing boat, and so we collected that and brought it aboard to get it out of the marine environment. But the really odd thing is having so much daylight. So it really, at this point, never gets dark. The sun goes below the horizon for a couple of hours, but it's just at twilight. And so my typical watch runs from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m., and the sun is still up when I get off of watch. And I go to my bunk, and there's a skylight kind of thing, a deck light above my bunk, and that is, the sunlight is beating through that into my eyes at 11 o'clock at night. It is really, really strange. And it's really strange to have no indication of the time of day based on the daylight. It's currently as bright as it would be at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's 10:36 at night right now. So I just became aware of that, and I realized it's time for me to go to bed. But just a really unusual place to be, Greenland. When we first saw it in the morning, again, we were sailing among these big icebergs, some of them as big as aircraft carriers, and you just see this huge white thing, and you don't get any sense of the scale of it until you get close, and you're like, whoa, that is big. And a lot of them were collected on this bank that was like 200 and 300 feet deep, and you realize they're collected there because they're aground. So they're so big that they're actually, aground in 200 feet of water, which is insanely huge. And so then Greenland loomed up out of the clouds, and you could see snow-topped mountains, and they were 25 miles, 30 miles away, which, if you know, when you're 30 miles out from the river mouth, you can't see any land at all. And here you have these big, huge mountains rising out of the ocean. So just a totally unbelievable place. And then Nuuk, the city of Nuuk, is oddly European. I'd say it's sort of Norse looking, which makes sense, it being part of Denmark. But the colors and the designs of the houses are really curious, and there's a lot of construction going on here. There's a lot of building of high-rise apartments, which is very curious. Some of the students took the little sailing skiff out today for a sail on the harbor. It was blowing a gale, and it was raining, but it didn't stop them. They had a great time. And tomorrow we are leaving and headed up to Disco Bay, to our northernmost point. We're currently at 64 north. We're shooting for 67 degrees north.